Bonjour à tous.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Thank you for being here. There are many of you here at this round table on Turkey, expression of a power, regional power, show of regional power. We have an hour and a half. I'm Grégory Reco. I'm a journalist at the Conversation France, and we will be talking about various aspects of the Turkish implication in that region, first in Turkey, of course in Syria, where 4 million Syrian refugees also are in Turkey. Turkey, as we know, is also involved in Libya. It is also very much present in the eastern part of the Mediterranean, with Greece and France, with NATO last year. It also supported Azerbaijan in the Caucasus. And even beyond that, beyond the region, beyond the immediate borders, we find Turkey very much present in Africa, trying to be a key player also in Afghanistan, has difficult relationships with the US, with Russia. Therefore, Turkey is very much present everywhere. In order to discuss this today, we have 4 panelists with us, and they will help us understand this issue. We have the Professor Ahmet İnsel, a journalist Ariane Bonzon. We have an economist and a European parliamentary. I will introduce them to you when they get the floor. Each one of them will talk for about 10 minutes, and then there will be a time of Q&A, and the panelists will answer your questions. We will start now with Ahmet İnsel. You are a university professor. You are also a journalist in Turkey. Your last novel or book, National Capitalism, Authoritarian Nationalism, a Threat for Democracy. Ahmet İnsel, in 10 minutes, could you tell us and could you explain to us Turkish politics? No, I wouldn't be able to do that. I will give you some insights, and Ariane can add to this. I'm going to be talking mainly, I'm going to give you a description, rather, of Turkey. Now, regarding the political aspect, the question that is being raised here is whether or not Turkey is a regional power, to which extent it is a regional power. The region as such, of course, we're talking here about the Middle East. We're talking about the Black Sea, which means all the surroundings of Turkey, the Balkans, and Caucasus. From that respect, when we talk about external foreign policies under Mr. Erdogan, we should make a distinction between 2 movements. There is a foreign policy which is an ongoing politics since the Second World War. It's been a continuity in their foreign policy. The same issues have been there since that time. For example, the Kurdish issue, which is not a new issue. This has been going on since the creation of the Republic of Turkey and since the Second World War. There were different attempts for regional agreements between countries that have Kurdish populations to try to meet the local claims. There were some agreements between Turkey, Iraq at some stage. The main issue here is to try to agree on the management of this Kurdish issue. Secondly, the Aegean Sea is not something new that just came with the AKP government. It has been going on since late 1960s, since the Cyprus issue, since the 1955. And at times, there was a lot of tension with the occupation or invasion of the north of Turkish in 1974. Also in the 90s, Turkey and Greece were confronting one another physically regarding the non-populated areas in the Aegean Sea region. And the third dimension for Turkey is it's belonging to NATO and the Western alliance. It's a trend that is not new, that has been going on since the Second World War. Turkey became member of NATO in 1952. The westernization of Turkey became member of OECD and became one of the first countries of the Council of Europe, and so on and so forth. The former prime minister, who was also a foreign minister of the Erdogan government, loved to say in the years 2010, 2011, that Turkey is a country from the south that is the most integrated in the north, from the south that is the most integrated from the north, member of the NATO, member of the Council of Europe, member of OECD, candidate for the European cohesion, etc. Not that many countries from the south show that many elements of integration. Now, a second way of looking at this with the ATP government, and especially after 2010 and 2011, in that respect, there were some additions and some changes. Okay, the one thing that has been remaining is the Kurdish issue. If Turkey is so aggressive in Syria, initially it was actually to turn over Bashar al-Assad, but not so much so now. We're talking most about the autonomous region of the Kurdish people. There's a panic of fear that there would be a new region, autonomous region in the south of Turkey after another region in Iraq. 900 kilometers of borders, there would be some autonomous regions for the Kurds, which would be a problem for the Turks in Turkey. That's their greatest fear, that the greatest fear that the Turkish nation has as of today. Second continuity, the second continuity is the issue with Greece, sharing of territorial waters, which has become even more tense after the discovery of natural gas in the region. There are some illegitimate claims on both sides, on the Greek side, on the Turkish side, and this should be solved around international arbitrage. On top of this, since 2010 and 2011, we have seen more specific policies with Turkey being much more proactive. Starting from the year 2000, even in that region in 2010, Turkey has been a lot more proactive. Just to give you an idea, Turkey today, Turkey, the fifth country in the world in terms of representations abroad after the US, China, France, Russia. Turkey, therefore, in the fifth position. This was not the case 20 years ago. That's very important. Just looking at Africa, for example, in 15 years, the diplomatic representation of Turkey went from 12 to 41. Today, in Africa, 2 countries are very active with an influence, both China and Turkey. The 2 countries are very much influential in Africa. They're very much in competition on many fields. Therefore, their proactivity was qualified as neo-Ottomanism, Ottoman, which reminds us of an expansion, territorial expansion of the Ottoman Empire, but we may get this impression that Turkey has a territorial overseeing over Cyprus, over Syria, and has military bases in Libya, for example. There's also another military basis in Somalia. There was going to be one in Sudan, but that dropped. Turkey also has a military basis, an important one in Qatar,
environ 60-65 000 soldats.
and has about 60,000 to 65,000 soldiers outside of Turkey, about 35 in northern Cyprus, about 20,000 in Syria, in Libya about 2,000, and a few others. Altogether around 60,000. We're talking about soldiers outside of Turkey, plus others in Libya, in Azerbaijan, Syrian additional soldiers, which are, if you like, the Wagner soldiers from Russia, you know. The Russians have their Wagner soldiers, which they are using in Libya mainly. Of course, this may seem as very aggressive and expansionist, yet for the main part, these policies are in line with a void of power in the region. Turkey, like Russia, is actually filling the gap of leadership after the withdrawal of America and the total absence of European policies in the region. At the same time, it's like a call to meet the gap, to make up for this aggressive policy. Now, regarding the foreign policy of Turkey, there has been some successes in Libya. I am not supporting the intervention, but objectively speaking, this policy actually was a success. They managed to reverse the support to the Maréchal Haftar, which, as far as France was concerned, I could not understand why France was supporting this character, a kind of character you would find in a Tintin cartoon. This has created setting aside EU and the US, and with Russia today, Turkey has a very ambivalent relationship of rivalry and negotiations. For the Russian, it is an ideal situation because it is weakening the NATO at the same time. It's weakening NATO, and that's good news for Russia. For Russia, also, having Turkey is not the same as having the Americans. In Syria, Russia is really doing what they want, the way they want, with Turkey on that field. It's a very great danger, threat for the future of the stability of Turkey. So in that respect, I would say that Turkey today, and I'm not going into all the domestic policies or domestic aspects, but part of this frenetic foreign policy is mainly due to make up for the failures of the domestic policy. Now, regarding foreign policies, and I would end with this statement, in Turkey there is a consensus with the foreign policy, a greater consensus, much greater consensus with the foreign policy rather than the domestic policy. The opposite party is not against the intervention of Turkey in Azerbaijan against Armenia. Apart from the far left opposition party and the pro-Kurd party, all the other opposition parties are backing Erdogan in this respect. On the Cyprus issue also, they are supporting him. Maybe regarding Libya, maybe with Libya and the Mediterranean issue, the former military forces are just coming up with some incredible plans, with the agency being totally Turkish, which would be the opposite of what the Greek would want, a nationalist program. But regarding Libya, maybe there might be a slight tension. What why are we in Libya? What are we doing in Libya? And then to conclude, I would say that there is a real tension
la menée de politique étrangère
regarding the foreign policy. Are we in that region? Are we going to be coming out of our alliances, Western alliances? Are we moving towards a much more unstable alliance in the short term and medium term?
des dangers
An alliance that could lead to some dangers regarding the security of Turkey with China and Russia, even in that respect, compared to 20 years ago.
les oppositions en Turquie
Oppositions in Turkey
aller dans le sens
are actually supporting the anti-Western policy, which means that the foreign policy in Turkey is seen as an anti-Western policy.
Maintenant vers Rien de Bonzon, je rappelle rapidement, et comme nous sommes dans le cadre...
So I'd like to remind you, since this is the Forum Normandy for Peace, that you have personally assisted to the peace process, and you can compare the different processes in South Africa. And you have been working for 20 years now on Turkey, so a country you know very well. Mr. Insel talked about different aspects, how the population in Turkey perceives things done by Erdogan. 85 million people there, with 20% of Kurdish people, and different political and social categories. How do these different categories perceive the different lines of the policy led by Ankara? And is it unanimous, or what about the different economic actors? Are there questions where it is more contrasted? Thank you, Grégoire. Grégory, I'm very happy to be here. We wonder about the regional influence of Turkey, but you are the proof that there is a true interest for Turkey. And I don't know if Mr. Ahmed Insel thinks the same thing, but we have been in several symposiums together, and all the rooms are full. I'm not sure 20 years ago it would have been the same, and that is a sign. People are listening, they are interested in Turkey, and the word provided by Turkey has an interest for the general public. You're reminded that I was in Israel and South Africa. When I arrived in Turkey in '96, after a few years, there was a beginning of a peace process with the Kurdish people. And after South Africa, where it was a success, Israel-Palestine, it was not a success in terms of peace process, but maybe I thought this time it would be a success in Turkey. Unfortunately, in 2015, it didn't last 6 years. There was ups and downs, and there was this hope that failed. And that is still something that the Turkish population, that they had to support this failure. They had to endure this failure to understand. We need to understand the situation now. And a lot of people have a tendency to present this policy as Erdogan did this, he did that. Okay, the neo-Ottoman policy. I know that Ahmed Insel has his reservations on this expression, but it's still Erdogan. We have some reasons to see things through him. But if you remember, in 2017-18, he instaured a presidentialist government, more than a presidential government, accumulating the chief of police, chief of foreign policy, chief of party, and prime minister, because there's no more prime minister. So, of course, we can see very well that it's easy to think that it is Erdogan. But what is interesting is to know that Erdogan has his eyes on the polls. He's obsessed with surveys and polls, and so I will speak about the public opinion in Turkey. How do they perceive Erdogan's policy? And on the Erdogan story, there's only 59% of the Turkish people who consider that indeed he is the one working on the policy, foreign policy. And 2 years ago, we thought he was alone. working on it. The public opinion believes that the Ministry of Defense and the intelligence services also have a growing role in foreign policy. So this is very interesting because it rationalizes the glance that we have, the vision we have as Europeans. And so Ahmed gave an overlook of the situation. And what is interesting is that the general opinion, depending on the general landscape, sees it through Erdogan or his peers. But foreign policy is defined by vital interests, economic or securitarian, as in Iraq, in the Mediterranean, and also by the idea that I will probably go deeper into repairing the injustices of the past. We know that a number of problems are not new, namely in the Mediterranean. There's also the idea that what happened before us wasn't right, and we need to fix these things. So in the Mediterranean, there were a certain number of agreements which didn't respect Turkish people's rights in terms of borders, etc. And third point that is also very representative of Erdogan's Turkey, it's to giving Turkey the place it deserves, a certain influence within the region. All the idea of neo-Ottomanism, it's a narration. We are going to use it to make a clip explaining, for example, policies of military productions in the Mediterranean region, a young boy reading a book, and he sees different characters, the grand maneuvers of the successes of the Ottoman Empire, and then you will have an image of the Turkish Marine. This neo-Ottomanism has inscribed the proactive policy of Turkey in the line of the historical continuity. This is more about storytelling. So this public opinion, firstly, I'm basing my speech on a study made by a university. I'm not going to give you percentages and figures, but trends rather. This public opinion in Turkey between 2016 and today is twice as it defines itself, self-defines itself as twice as much nationalistic. So this means that 5 years ago, when we asked Turkish people, how do you define yourself, as nationalists or no, now it's 24% saying yes. So with this increase, and we can measure it differently as well, this nationalist sensitivity is not considered as a flaw or fault. It's part of the country, so to speak, or there's a certain national pride in the country. There are nationalistic parties that define themselves as such, etc. So when we see that this trend exists, we understand there's an answer to this trend. Since there's this nationalist sensitivity, it needs to be fed, as we can imagine. And this is what Erdogan could answer. And as Ahmed Insel said it, the case of Syria and Iraq are different. So there is a belief in the Turkish public opinion that what is taking place in Iraq is a danger for the Republic of Turkey, which means that roughly Americans, France, and Germany, and a certain number of anti-type countries came close to Kurdish, PKK, other Kurdish groups who are at war against the Turkish state, and as Ahmed explained, want to guarantee autonomy, and later in Turkey as well. So maybe rightly or wrongly, a great number of the Turkish population believes that in Syria and Iraq, it is normal to be present. And 50% of the population supports the cross-border operations with the countries, the counter-terrorist actions. What is very interesting, on the other hand, is that you need to know that the Turkish opinion believes that the enemy number one are the United States. 47% believe 54% believe that the main threat comes from the United States. And why? Because of this alliance in Syria.
Donc ça, c'est quelque chose.
So this is something that changed. And it is true, for them, the United States represent a threat. 47% of people believe that the vision of counterterrorism that
Les États-Unis.
the United States have is not that of Turkey. So they became more fragile, and we are in a very opposite position. We believe that we have been able to fight Daesh. We went to see them, and in a certain way, they helped to defend France from a number of terrorist attacks. It is quite the opposite from the Turkish point of view. It's an important element to understand how they think and how it works. So this is it for Syria and Iraq. This is very special, but even though if this is interesting, we saw on the side of the military army, the army in Turkey, the Turkish army is believed that not to stay too long. There are maybe several dozens of American soldiers who are killed, and each time a coffin goes back to the States, it's a drama. And they were bombed by the Russians as well, we should say. They're believed to be the Allied in Syria. But so there are things happening, a decrease of the opinion. They believing that don't know whether the Turkish army should be there or not. The second country in the public opinion's eyes, which is a danger for Turkey, is Israel. And that is very radical. It means that they consider that 42% of the population believes that this is enemy number 2 of Turkey, and that no reconciliation can be possible. Third country, which represents a danger for the Turkish public opinion, is Armenia. Although there have been attempts, there had been trouble between Azerbaijan, a war between Azerbaijan and Armenia, because part of the territories were occupied by Armenia. So we could discuss about it. These were lands that belonged to Armenia historically, but after the war, after the end of 2020, Azerbaijan, thanks to the support, as Ahmed said, to the Turkish support, Azerbaijan got back a part of the land, and Turkey is resolutely on Azerbaijan's side against Armenia. So there's an attempt, or perhaps a hope, of a peaceful negotiation between Azerbaijan and Armenia, but we see there's not much support, not many Turkish who support this idea. Although now that Azerbaijan is not asking for anything, it has what it wanted, it got its lands back, we thought there are only 3 Turkish people who say they support out of 100. So now Greece is still enemy number 4 for 4 Turkish out of 10, which means that it is enemy number 4. The problem is the militarization of the islands in the Aegean Sea, and that is a majority of opinion, in terms of opinion.
Qui date depuis longtemps.
That is a long-lasting issue. On the other hand, what is interesting is that when they are asked how can this been settled, 6% of Turkish people say we need a favored diplomacy, negotiation. On the other hand, in Cyprus, this island divided in 2, one part is Turkish Cypriot and recognized by Turkey. The positions are much tougher from the Turkish people. In 2004, the possibility of a federal state between the north and the south of Cyprus, and that was relatively well supported by the Turkish. Now, 50% of the public opinion in Turkey said no, it's better to annex the Cypriot Republic. So the northern part should be attached to Turkey, a tougher position, which is worrisome
Que pourrait faire le président Erdogan?
of what Erdogan could do. A certain number of observers say that given the situation of the policy, the economic policy, which is a situation which is bad, and other aspects as well, we need to have a trump card during the elections in 2023, and a lot of people are afraid that they will move onto Cyprus. How, I don't know, but it might be the trump cards they hold out because they were supported by public opinion. And to sum up this public opinion, we can see really, and this is very interesting, that
L'envoi de l'armée
sending the army on foreign land is less and less popular. And especially in Libya and even Cyprus, but Cyprus, we need to know that the military presence in
dans le monde,
foreign countries concerns 8 countries. We used to have Afghanistan, but they left in August. So 8 countries, 60,000 soldiers, as Ahmed said.
l'opinion publique turque est de
The public opinion in Turkey has more reservations and is doubtful about sending the army on other fronts. 7 Turkish out of 10 applauded and really wanted the army and the 600 last soldiers in Afghanistan to come home. On the other hand, and this is how I'm going to conclude, what is very new, it's not quite new, but what is very marked in the polls is we see that the Turkish public opinion wants more and more for Turkey to have a mediator role.
pas la majorité, mais
Not the majority of people, but around 30%.
c'est déjà quelque chose.
So this is something that was suggested during the years 2010 with soft power. Ahmed Davutoglu had targeted the idea of Turkey being a mediator between Israel and Syria, for example. Since then, with the Syrian crisis, there were huge tensions and very big antagonism. But now it's coming back. 39% of people say we have to be neutral, to hold a neutral role between Israel and Arabs, Israelis and Arabs, even in Syria.
On a le problème kurde, d'accord.
We have the Kurdish problem, okay, but 43% said no, let's remain neutral with Syria. No need to get mixed into this in this trouble. My conclusion is Afghanistan. And in Afghanistan and Central Asia, there have been classical policies favoring all ethnic
Turc ou d'origine turque.
or leaders of Turkish origins. Stam was a chief of war with a terrible reputation, extremely violent. And we see a turning point now, a real change, because Erdogan does not like, not because he doesn't like Dostum, but because there's a change and Turkey wants to be a Muslim power, but at the same time, it wants to have this role as mediator. And in this way, we can say if this continues, if it manages to do this in Afghanistan, namely mediation between the United States and other countries, people, it's okay.
Si elle arrive à faire
With the Afghanistan of Taliban's, with the Taliban's now, then Erdogan will be in phase with his public opinion,
si l'on en croit,
which expressed, if we believe the last polls before the summer of 2021, the public opinion in Turkey aspires to more peace.
Merci beaucoup, Ariane Bonzon, pour cette intervention.
Thank you very much, Ariane Bonzon, for this very rich presentation. You mentioned one element, that's the economic situation. Every country has the foreign policy that the economy allows. Sometimes that the situation might change through a successful war. I'm going to now give the floor to Mr. Bahadir Kaleaghazi. We have Mr. Bahadir Kaleaghazi online with us.
Monsieur Kalazi, je rappelle en deux mots.
Mr. Kaleaghazi, you are the director of a think tank called the Bosphorus Institute. You are an economist, and you will be able to explain to us both, either in French or in English. We have live translation. You can choose to speak French or English. up to you. What is the economic situation in Turkey? Is it really terrible with a high inflation rate, high unemployment rate, much higher than the official figures? Or is the economy, after the health crisis, which was quite difficult for Turkey, is the economy recovering? Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here with you, with all these great experts and the political leaders. I have had the opportunity to listen to them in another session regarding Germany, the German elections. Now I'm going to talk about what's happening in Berlin. Of course, what's happening in Berlin would have some political implications on Turkey. I'm the president of the Bosphorus Institute based in Paris. At the moment, currently, I'm in Istanbul. This institute gathers a lot of leaders, mainly French, but also a lot of Turkish leaders, personalities, people from other countries like Germany and other countries, from the political field, economic field, from the media sector, and other organizations, government organizations, academics, etc. And what we're trying to do through various initiatives and various approaches, we're trying to see how Turkey can be integrated or better integrated to Europe. We can do this because we are pro-European and we think the world needs Europe. Of course, that's the first point. That's the first track for thinking in that sense. Now, coming back to the economy, the last decade regarding the economic performance of Turkey, based on various indicators like foreign investments, the Turkish performance from a human indicator or the inflation rate as well, or other systems, structures like education, energy, technology, all the analysis, whether it be in Constantinople or Istanbul, for Turkey. So all of this shows a better integration in Europe. The more this has been successful and the more Turkey has been attacked on an economical level, from there on, regarding the foreign trade, investments, as I said, with all kinds of partnerships, Turkey has been showing an upgrade, economically and socially speaking, as far as the European integration. I'm not talking about adhesion. Europe is changing, and Europe will be a different Europe tomorrow. We will see what it will become. But for the meantime, it can be said that there is an integration. And despite this situation, things could have been a lot worse. But now, we were talking about Turkish economy. What we can highlight is the European dimension and see whether or not the European integration of Turkey, I'm not talking about the adhesion of Turkey as such, but how can this process find a more of a win-win equation, both for Europe and for Turkey, but also for the surrounding countries on our continent. strong, robust economic partnership. Of course, the political tensions have to be managed.
Important dans les élections
It will not be so important in the coming elections in 2023.
comme dans les autres pays du monde,
Just like any other countries, during the election period, foreign policy is not so important. Yet the economic effects or impact will have more impact because Turkey is going through an economic crisis with a high inflation rate of 20%,
qui est
and the currency is at the lowest since the the history of the Republic of Turkey. It's a major crisis, a high level of unemployment among the young people who are neither at school nor doing training nor working, and that's over 20% as well.
de cette intégration
We do need this European integration also for economy, for social development,
nationale prochaine.
and for the coming national elections.
Tout choix, toute proposition
So any proposals, any choice of European policy would have an effect on the electorate. So what to do, what should be done?
sur le plan de l'évolution de l'intégration européenne et défis mondiaux.
And we should be thinking in terms of the European integration and the world's global challenges. This cannot be taken separately. We are trying to fight a biological virus
Qui affectent nos sociétés,
which has been affecting our societies, our civilization,
très contagieux,
which seems to be very contagious, through globalization, which in this sense is a good thing, with yet some perverse effects as well.
les virus financières. On a vu
We have also seen during the economic crisis of 2008-9 how all the countries had become very much interdependent on one another,
infectés
and how foreign
des petits problèmes
currencies were affected because of smaller issues, starting, for example, in Singapore or in Spain or Russia,
de plus grands dangers pour nos démocraties.
which is also another danger for democracy
Le virus de carbone dioxyde de carbone.
with carbon dioxide.
Les grands défis qui vont défier
So the main challenges for the Turkish citizens or European citizens or Japanese or African or whatever are the same, actually.
évidemment de débattre
And of course, we could debate to try to think for a better future,
négatifs.
looking at the positive and negative effects of globalization.
Il faut tirer les leçons du passé.
We need to be looking also at the past and learning from the mistakes from the 90s.
Que Bruxelles a engagé là-dessus
Every time that
pour les valeurs et pour les politiques européennes,
for the European policies, for the European citizens and the Turkish citizens,
de la culture
the exclusion of Turkey from the European community was a difficult time.
c'est de
We could try to highlight what happened in the past and learn from the past. If Turkey was integrated in the European process, if Mr. Sarkozy had not stopped
des bureaucrates, des technocrates,
the participation of experts, Turkish diplomats in the foreign policy making, when Turkey
convergence avec
was completely in convergence
commune de
with common policies in terms of foreign policy in the years 2000, 2007, and 2008. sorry, unfortunately, the quality of the video is not very good. The flux is cutting. Could you maybe conclude? Unfortunately, the connection is not of very good quality. I can hear you fine. Okay, sorry about this. Let me conclude then.
Quand elle était bien engagée dans le processus européen,
Turkey was well on the way during in the European process.
était un pays qui avait accepté la politique
It was a country that had accepted the Cyprus policy
européenne, donc la Turquie
from the EU, that is. Therefore, Turkey supported, at 100% supported,
la réunion
the reunification and the peace in Cyprus. And the Turkish people from Cyprus also voted yes for Europe.
Donc c'était un moment
It was well on the way. And then there were some barriers from southern Cyprus under the influence of Moscow, of Mr. Sarkozy.
problème 100%
And Turkey had produced their programs.
toutes les deux parties.
So both parties lost, actually, during that equation. Now, what can be done?
Les problèmes sont réels.
Yes, there are some real issues. There needs to be a democratic continuity. Turkey is going through, soon will be going through economic transition.
La société
Society is changing. Global challenges are changing. Europe is changing as well.
conviendrait d'avoir
Therefore, it would be good to have in Europe a tool to be activated in order to support that transition according to European values. So maybe this is talking here about modernization, economic transition. The EU, for some time, is renewing its relationships with the rest of the world, but not with Turkey. This agreement dates back to the 1980s, which was concluded at a time when there was no World Trade Organization, there was no internet,
ou de la Russie comme acteurs économiques.
and Russia was not a key player. We were not talking about sustainability so much, or the SDGs, which have to guide all the economic policies and social policies now. Therefore, the time has changed. Time has come now to honor this agreement and to adopt an approach from the 21st century, including Turkey in the digital and the green transition of the EU
démocratique pour conclure le processus de
in order to conclude the negotiation process, but not to start it, because history shows that every time that the EU has started a process of integration with Turkey, it's been working. It was successful both for the interest of European citizens,
valeurs européens
complying to European values for the EU and for Turkey. If we adopt
d'inaction ou de
policies of barriers and inaction, we will continue to have problems, which will be mainly.
Très bien, Monsieur Galizzi, merci beaucoup.
Mr. Galizzi, we get your point, we get your advocacy, and our last panelist, Mr. Sargenti, who is a EU parliamentary member in charge of the relationship between Europe and Mr. Sergei Lagodinsky, member of the EU Parliament. I believe he will be speaking in English.
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, thank you. So yeah, we have a translation, so you can speak English, and everybody can switch their headphones on and listen to you in French. please. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Oui, donc, je vais quand même
Thanks for this
No,
very interesting.
yes, I wanted just to ask you to say what you think about what Mr. Kaleasi says when he says that Turkey needs to be closer to the European Union. How would you describe the relations today between Turkey and the European Union, and what is the future?
I think we should always draft our policy based on the past, but not stuck in the present. And this is the problem that I have with our Turkey relationship now, especially when people address the issue of accession process. We are looking at the situation now and try to extrapolate from the situation now to what the situation will be in the future, and basically imagine the future situation as a status quo from today. And I think this is one of the problems with many voices, also a lot of voices in our parliament, who would like to suspend the accession process with Turkey. I think that this is wrong for two reasons. Number one, suspension as opposed to the freeze, which I agree with, which we're having now. Number one, suspension will be basically the end of accession process. To reverse the suspension, you would need unanimity of member states. And basically what we're saying is it's the end of it. This is the difference to the freeze that we have now. Now you can legitimately have this position, but we should think about two things. Number one, we have a very vivid civil society still, despite all the oppression. We have a very vivid, very diverse civil society in Turkey. We have an economy in Turkey with businesses, which is not comparable to the situation in Russia, for example, where you have a lot of independent, state independent, and also state critical actors. You have an opposition in Turkey, which, despite tremendous pressure that opposition is experiencing, is still a relevant actor. And by that I mean mostly CHP, but we also, of course, have E-Party, but also still have HDP, which I firmly support every time I'm in Turkey. And I think that the process of banning HDP should be stopped. I think this is an oppressive tool, but still we do have those forces. And these forces and this diversity and this civil society and the citizens of Turkey deserve a chance in the future. So this is kind of the visionary, maybe value-driven or solidarity-driven agenda. But the other point that I think many of those who propose that the accession process with Turkey should be halted or stopped, what they forget is the following. Accession process gives us a platform that allows us to talk to our Turkish partners in a way we cannot talk to others. When some of the speakers said that we should distinguish between foreign policy and domestic policy, when we talk about Turkey, some people would say yes, because we of course can have a say in foreign policy, but not in domestic policy. Well, this is not the case with Turkey. If I talk about Russia, if I talk about Belarus, if I talk about other countries, I can express wishes regarding their internal affairs and domestic affairs, regarding undemocratic situation there, but I cannot do much because the legitimacy of my criticism is a criticism of a foreign actor. in the situation with Turkey, precisely because of the accession process and because of the chapters that are still open, but that legitimize our views and our criticism and our wishes, it makes us, the European Union, to an actor with a legitimate concern and legitimate leverage. If we stop the process, we will not be able to express criticism, wishes, ideas with the same legitimacy regarding the domestic situation and an undemocratic state of, I mean, this must be also expressed, and undemocratic tendencies in Turkey. From that, extrapolating from that, I would just make a couple of points that I think are important as kind of our guidelines on how we should talk about Turkey and with Turkey. So, number one, I think that Turkish foreign policy, active foreign policy, and sometimes I must say also aggressive foreign policy, is also a reflection of our non-policy in many of those issues, both of European and American inactivity in many parts of the world. I think one of the predecessors mentioned it in his speech as well. It is important to emphasize this. We were not present in Nagorno-Karabakh crisis. We did not do anything to intervene, to stop the situation there. Turkey and Russia has divided basically the pie, more Turkey than Russia, I must say. More Russian than Turkey in this case. This is number one, and number two, I think it is also important to see that Turkey, of course, has its own interests, and just like France acts is very active abroad, I think that Germany should be more like France. We should develop in that direction. Then, of course, there is a legitimate interest on behalf of Turkey to be active. We should be watching that these activities should be within the limits of international law, and that they should not be instrumentalized, for example, in order to make basically de facto ethnic cleansing in northern Syria. These are the points that we should criticize, but not the activity per se, which happens very often and brings us into a realm of this neo-Ottoman terms. I see you're grabbing the microphone. I'm coming to a close. I think that we should work on Turkey being anchored in the Western family, something which geostrategically is important to us. This is also something that I think the Biden administration is trying to do. Number four, the accession process, as I mentioned, legitimizes us to make our wishes regarding domestic situation. And for that, we should use the leverages that we have. I think one criticism that I have on Ms. von der Leyen, which I said to them, we can talk about our agenda. It cannot be positive. It should be just an agenda, positive, negative words. Customs union, yes, let's talk about customs union. Green New Deal for Turkey, let's talk about Green New Deal for Turkey. But let's understand that we have a leverage and we have a say. So if we want customs union, from my perspective, we would need some real progress on democracy front. Release Osman Kavala would be a great sign. Let's negotiate customs union. Come back to the Istanbul Convention would be a wonderful sign. Stop the ban process for HDP would be a great positive sign. Not democracy agenda or human rights in writing, as Mr. Erdogan does this, but something specific. And this is the stance that I don't see from the European Union. That we say we have a leverage, especially in this economic situation that Turkey is now. Let's use it and move forward, but not move forward just for the sake of moving forward, but for the sake of Turkish people and Turkish civil society. And that is the relationship we have to turn around. And with this attitude, I think we will move forward. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Lagounis.
Thank you, Mr.
Et pragmatique. Alors,
Sergei Lagodinsky. Now we are going to take some questions from the room, so people will come around and pass the microphone around. I will ask quick questions, and please indicate which person on the panel you want to ask your question to. Sir. Hello. I am Oscar Asland. I'm number 2 of the embassy in Turkey. So there are many things that were said, and I disagree with, but I'm not going to take too much time and go back on every point that was mentioned to not take up too much of your time. But I'm very happy that so many people are present today and show interest for Turkey. And I think that in France, a great part of the problems compared to the vision or the image that civil society has of Turkey comes from the fact that the Turkish policy is a little broken by the media and the way in which they look at Mr. Erdogan and everything that Turkey is managing. So if you see it through the eye of Mr. Erdogan. So perhaps to add on to what was said, I'd like to come back to Mrs. Bonzon said in Cyprus. Last year there were elections in Cyprus, and the new government, which was elected democratically, wants to continue the discussions about equality between the two countries. So this is a change, it's a break between what had happened in the past, and I believe that Turkey will not invent the Cyprus of the south to connect it to Turkey before the elections. So what we are doing, we are supporting this approach because since 2004 we have seen with the plan in Germany, which was voted on the Turkish side but wasn't accepted. I just want to say one more thing. So that was a comment and my question. I would like to finish, Mr. Insel, and as Mr. Deputy said about the geography in the Eastern Mediterranean, I share this idea. My question is, how do you see, with the French presidency at the EU very soon, with the agreement recently between France and Greece about the sale of shuttles, and will this city, will it be replaced by a sovereignty of the EU? Thank you very much. Mr. Insel, would you like to answer to this question? I believe that Mr. Lagordinsky would have also something to say, but yes, there is a gap that is in this space since the retrieval of the military troops, the American troops. It's not since, and that is since Obama, not since Trump. The Americans are starting to retrieve from the Middle East, and more for them. The strategy, the main strategy, is to prepare the new planetary battle with China. So this is part of the redeployment strategy. The Middle East is becoming less important, and for some countries, these retrieval strategy are important for Israel, namely. Concerning Turkey, the withdrawal. So Turkey has positions that are historically set or frozen. And for some questions, Turkey has a diplomacy that has difficulties in expressing calmly things, and that has been the case for 10 years. Since 2010, until 2010, Turkey's diplomacy was a low-profile one. I'm not talking about the occupation in Cyprus in '74, but even concerning that, there was a certain consensus first in '74, it was a fascist coup.
Intervenait
Because Turkey wanted to overthrow the fascist EUKB government.
C'est autre chose.
Then it's something else. There was the second operations, etc. But concerning the Mediterranean, there is a confrontation between two nationalisms, and on these questions, it is very difficult to solve problems from the pressure of the public opinion that comes from public opinion. Public opinion in Greece is also as nationalist as the Turkish public opinion, if not more so. And I believe that from this point of view, it is important one day to be able to find an international arbitration as France and Canada had found for Saint-Pierre and Miquelon. For the EU today, France is leading a French policy. It is not an EU policy. The EU doesn't have any policy. I don't know if Mr. Lagodinsky, you are going to say things differently, but there is a French policy, and Turkey is face-to-face with France. But in this face-to-face with France, it's on three areas. The most important today is Libya. It is more quiet today, but here, again, I do not support Erdogan's policy. You know me well enough. But I think there's a French responsibility in the Libyan policy. France has taken the option, a securitarian option, and let down the support it should have given with the government provided by the UN. Then for Turkey, there was a gap, an avenue that Erdogan replaced immediately. And this is the responsibility of France. What is France doing? We could wonder about this. If France had taken the initial position that the Italians took, same thing goes with Syria in a certain way. I'm not saying that for France today, but Obama at some point should have intervened, because we cannot say, I will intervene, and then at the last moment I'm not doing anything, so you have to say it from the beginning. And in this case, Turkey is left in a difficult spot, difficult position. Until 2014, Turkey had the same position, the closest to Syria, but Libya. But what is more complicated now, it's with Greece. France has chosen the option to support Greece around this question, with the EU, which decided to support Greece also on these topics. That is inevitable. We need to acknowledge the fact that in a conflict with Greece, the EU cannot be alongside with Greece because it is a member state, because it's just like Turkey in a conflict with Iraq, Iran, or Russia. NATO can only be on the side alongside with Turkey because Turkey is a member of NATO. So I end on Azeri questions. Syria. I think this is an engagement, historical engagement of Turkey, and we need to wonder and question ourselves. We need to ask why Armenians for 20 years have not, while they were in a strong positions, they were occupying the Azeri territories, they did not provide this peace position. So Turkey is using the voids, the gaps that are created by diplomacy of the Western world. Mr. Lagodinsky, do you share this opinion?
Monsieur Lagodinsky.
Mr. Lagodinsky.
Yes, I wanted to follow up on that. First of all, I completely agree about the analysis of the three areas, Libya, Syria, and the situation with Greece, including my bewilderment or surprise about the French position regarding Libya. Because this, of course, makes also our criticism of Turkish involvement very precarious. We cannot say why we actually oppose someone intervening on the side of a government which is a recognized legitimate government of a country. And then it's difficult to see the details which were problematic and to address them. In terms of Greece and Cyprus, I absolutely agree, and this is the starting point, that we also as a parliament are always on the side of our Greek friends and partners. This is structurally the way that was described here. But at the same time, as an independent politician, let's put it this way, I do think that we carry responsibility for the very difficult situation regarding Cyprus. And I do think that we should be also wary and conscious about that Europe and our members did not always behave in a productive way regarding the conflict in Cyprus. And the membership situation is also not a very easy position, the decision to grant membership, despite the conflict. But it is as it is. And on that point, I do disagree with the representative of the Turkish embassy, who says there is no problem on behalf of the Turkish side. Well, if the Turkish president visits during the election campaign Cyprus and basically intervenes into political processes in Cyprus, if there is a constant talk about a one-state solution regarding Cyprus, even though it is very clear that all other actors and the EU does not want two-state solution, of course, that we do not want a two-state solution. And the situation with Varosha, I don't even want to describe that. This is a flagrant violation of all the agreements that we had. So I would not say, I understand the history and the responsibility of European Union throughout the history. I understand this. And maybe some nationalist rhetoric also on behalf of Cyprus and of Greece, which I don't support in that vehemence. But the Turkish side is actively, also for domestic reasons, actively intervening there and putting more oil into fire. So I would be more balanced also in this protection. And it's not the fault of the media. It's the real objective behavior also of the Turkish side.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Lagodinsky. Une autre question dans la salle?
Thank you very much. Any other question in the room? Would somebody like to ask a question? Yeah, we have a gentleman on the second row. We will provide you with a microphone. So very briefly, because we only have 15 minutes left, a short question now. I would like to know what the relations are between Turkish and namely with Russia, the relationships with Russia.
Monsieur Ancel.
Mr. Ancel. In the 90s, Turkey had a certain euphoria with the fall of the implosion of Soviet Union in the 90s. So Turkey was euphoric. It had a little romantic idea to go back to what existed in the past and people being freed from the Russians. This euphoria fell very quickly because we noticed that besides Azerbaijan, roughly, and there is a very strong proximity, a cultural, historic proximity with the countries like Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, namely, Uzbekistan also, slightly, and Russian anthropism. So let's not forget that contrarily to the Balkans and the Caucasian areas, these countries never were part of the Ottoman Empire. There's an image that these are partly Muslim, Turcophile, but there's no common life, no common past together, except for very far in the past. So there was a fall of this euphoria. And now they're walking on eggs because the more Turkey has adopted an active policy to promote the Turkish identity or of this brotherhood. There's an international organization of Turkish language country. I think Kurdistan is the president today. Russia is irritated from this point of view because they considered that all of this part of is its natural land, which is not wrong, historically speaking, but it doesn't justify the ingerences. And the more Turkey moves away from the Western world, the more Turkey has the possibility to lead an active policy in Central Asia because it is obliged to be careful with Russia. With Azerbaijan, it's a bit different because there is a true historical proximity, geographical proximity, a cultural proximity that is much stronger. Let's not forget that the countries which are such as Uzbekistan, namely Kazakhstan, also are countries that are very secular. And there is a worry with Erdogan because they consider that Erdogan's Turkey, or for one part of the leaders at least, is a vector of Islamization. And since Erdogan appears today as having a Islamo-nationalist speech, of course, there's a certain mistrust in this region. And therefore, the Turkish presence is accepted, but it is not fully favored. So some schools have been closed, and before Erdogan declared the war, Uzbekistan, all the Turkish investors were thrown out. The Gulen schools were closed. And on the paper, there is this romantic nostalgia, of course, of the Turkish Union that supports the extreme nationalist right. They are very intent on that. But currently, they lost a lot of credibility when he totally closed his eyes and mouth with what is happening in China with the Uyghurs, the Muslim Uyghurs. But he was the one to declare in 2007-08 that China was carrying out a genocide, which was perhaps exaggerated at the time, but he pronounced the word of genocide on the Chinese policy in Xinjiang. And now Turkey and the pro-government press is completely blinded on what is happening concerning the Uyghurs, the Turkish Uyghurs in China. So Madame Ariane Bonzon would also like to react, perhaps. Yes, without saying it's a Central Asian country. It's interesting to see, as what Ahmed said, Turkey is or was set aside by Russia. It had some problems, but in Afghanistan, it perhaps is finding an opportunity. It is risky. It is associated to Qatar. You know that the airport, it was already the role of Turkey to manage the airport with a military presence. But the big negotiation currently is to know how they can manage the airport without any Turkish soldiers. So there is a question of using a private Turkish company, which is at the origins of the training of mercenaries that we send to Karabakh or to Libya. So there is a stake here to preserve the region, but he is faced to Russia, who is very careful of this Turkish handheld on this area. Within the Turkish public opinion, it is not seen very positively. Now, Turkey was the first country at NATO, or the only one, to reopen its embassy. They were among the first to reopen their embassy. They indeed had relations with Talibans, and as I said before, they wanted to be a country that can speak to Talibans, whether the Western world or Europe is having issues with that. It's not to catch up with the points lost in Central Asia, but their desire to grasp what is graspable and seizable. So the decision of the government, they have a few men among the Talibans in Turkey. They have a few privileged spokespeople, and among them, some are at the government as set up by the Talibans. So thank you very much. One other question in the room.
Oui, bonjour.
Hello. Thank you for your speeches. It was very fascinating. My first question, I well understood before that we talked about Turkey, and that Turkey was moving away from Europe when Europe said that it wasn't going to be part of the EU. And Erdogan was in power at the time or not, because I'm not sure. I cannot remember perfectly well. And this shows very well that the gap between the EU and Turkey has made the expansion of Turkey in foreign affairs a sort of pressure point. Is there something there, a correlation between the two, or when the Americans came and decided to Balkanize things, they said they wanted to give autonomy to the Kurds, the Kurdish people? What about the Turkish expansion on the international level? It is an internal change in the conception of diplomacy, the Turkish diplomacy, the classic Turkish diplomacy since the Second World War and since Mustafa Kemal, since the 1930s, has always used a policy or taken sides for being prudent, careful. That was until the 70s. That was the strategy was we need to consolidate what we have, what we saved after the First World War. We need to consolidate the Turkish state, stabilize it, integrate it in an alliance, a Western alliance that will give it the stability and security it needs. But we have a policy that is a low-profile one on the exterior. Turkey in 1958, for example, which was reproached for 10 years by the Algerians, voted against Algeria at the United Nations in 1958. So Turkey had a policy that was a very low-profile one. And the intervention at Cyprus changed things, but it was totally isolated. And as of today, the state of Northern Cyprus is de facto acknowledged only by Turkey, not by Azerbaijan, the closest ally. They do not acknowledge the Turkish part of Cyprus. So Turkey made some advances, but it was careful. It was worried. It looked in the direction of the Western world countries, and until the 80s, 90s, there were almost no diplomats, only 2 or 3 diplomats who knew how to speak Arab. It was totally, the eyes were totally turned towards the Western world.
Avec l'Union européenne,
In the years 2000 with the EU and also with the strategy, the new strategy that was set up, there was a change
de politique
in terms
extérieure
of exterior policy, and Turkey
en place
put in place
de,
a policy that was more and more proactive by
dans la région à
putting in the region, so
une
that
manière
was
de
presented in a romantic way by geopoliticians, Germans,
technologie
with a certain terminology, depth, strategy, etc., etc. But let's leave all of this aside, all of this nonsense. It has no meaning today. But Turkey chose the option of becoming more present
et surtout en Afrique.
in Africa, especially in Africa, because there was a deficit
En Afrique.
in
C'est pourquoi
Africa. So this is why Turkey
happé
was pulled in, attracted to the region. It was
faire
ready to do so. And I will close by that. The objective of Turkey, and then
dans l'espoir d'entrer à l'Union européenne,
it was to be part of the EU,
le
to be
partenaire
the partner,
le plus efficace
the most efficient partner between North and South. So this is why I said in my presentation
que la Turquie se
that Turkey
accepte
presented itself as the southern country, the most integrated in the north, and therefore able to be a bridge between the southern countries and the northern countries.
caractère
Being a southern typical country, able to understand the southern countries, but a member of the northern institutions, able to become their partner, just as with this explosion in the years 2000, and it's continued in this direction in the 2010s,
des relations diplomatiques en
of diplomatic relationships in Asia, Southeast Asia, Americas, to be a partner, to become a partner.
de l'Union
Now, the door of the EU being closed, Turkey is leading a foreign policy that is its foreign policy. But in the years 2000s, this policy, this proactive policy of Turkey was well supported with the perspective in which Turkey could become a stabilizing element in the region. But today, it does not appear as such anymore. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to give the floor to Ariane Bonzon to conclude because it's -1. We only have 1 minute left. I would like to thank everyone. And so Ahmet Insel, Bahadi Galiagazi, Sergei Lagodinsky, Ariane Bonzon, thank you. You will have the last word.
Conclusion for the EU. Why did we not stop this negotiation? Why is still Turkey a candidate? Why is Erdogan saying they still want to integrate the EU? It's unlikely, but the Member of Parliament said that there needs to be a channel of negotiation that needs to remain. If that process was to be stopped, there will be no more ways to put pressure on Turkey. From the Turkish side, President Erdogan said that that if he was to stop this process straight away, he would lose a lot of points. 7 Turkish out of 10 don't see an alternative to the EU. They still think that the only solution for Turkey is to integrate the EU. And over 50% think that negotiations need to continue. It's a bit over-realistic because, in a sense, people think it should be stopped, and yet no one is stopping those negotiations.